In 1897, in a small, forgotten town in northern England, there lived a clockmaker named Edwin Hargrove. He was not famous, he was not wealthy, but people whispered about him, not because of his clocks, but because of what happened to the people who bought them. Every single customer who ever purchased a clock from Edwin Hargrove received something extraordinary along with it. They were told exactly how much time they had left to live. Some laughed, some ignored it, but not a single prediction was ever wrong. This is the story of the man who could sell tomorrow, and the terrible price he paid for it.
Edwin Hargrove was born in 1851 in the village of Ashenmore, a place so small it barely appeared on any map. His father was a watchmaker, and his grandfather before him. Edwin grew up surrounded by the sound of ticking. Hundreds of clocks on the walls, on the shelves, under glass cases. By the age of 14, Edwin could build a clock from scratch. By 20, he was better than his father had ever been. But Edwin was a lonely man. He never married. He rarely spoke to anyone. The villagers said he preferred the company of his clocks to the company of people. And perhaps they were right, because Edwin believed something that no one else did. He believed that time was alive, that every tick of a clock was not just a measurement, but a heartbeat, the heartbeat of something ancient and invisible, something that watched. One evening in the autumn of 1889, a stranger arrived at Edwin's shop. The man was tall, thin, and pale. He wore a long black coat and carried no luggage. His eyes were the strangest Edwin had ever seen. They were not quite gray, not quite silver, but something in between, like the color of a sky just before a storm. The stranger did not browse. He walked directly to Edwin's workbench, sat down across from him, and said 5 words that changed everything. I know what time wants. Edwin stared at him. He wanted to laugh. He wanted to ask the man to leave. But something in those silver eyes held him still. Something old, something patient, something that had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. The stranger smiled. You hear it too, don't you? The ticking. Not from your clocks, from somewhere deeper, somewhere beneath everything. Edwin's hands began to tremble because the stranger was right. He had heard it every night since he was a child. A ticking that came from nowhere. A rhythm that matched no clock he had ever built. The stranger leaned forward and placed something on the workbench. A small black gear. It was no larger than a coin, but it was heavier than anything Edwin had ever held. Put this inside your next clock, and when someone buys it, you will know. Not guess, not estimate. You will know exactly how many days they have left. Edwin stared at the gear. It was impossibly smooth. No tool marks, no imperfections. It looked as though it had not been made. It looked as though it had grown. Why? Edwin whispered. Because time has a face it never shows, the stranger replied. And you are the only craftsman alive who can hear its voice. All I am offering is a way to see what you have always heard. price?
The stranger stood up and walked toward the door. "The price," he said without turning around, "will become clear in time." And then he was gone. No footsteps, no sound of the door. Just silence and the small black gear sitting on the workbench, catching the candlelight like a tiny, patient eye. Edwin told himself he would not use the gear. He placed it in a drawer, locked the drawer, and tried to forget. But the ticking grew louder. Every night, it filled his small bedroom above the shop, a deep, slow rhythm that seemed to come from the walls, from the floor, from inside his own chest. After 11 sleepless nights, Edwin gave in. He built a clock, a beautiful mahogany mantel clock with brass fittings and a white porcelain face. And deep inside the mechanism, hidden behind the mainspring, he placed the black gear. The moment it clicked into position, something changed. The clock began to tick, but not with the sound of a normal clock. It was deeper, richer, almost like breathing. The next morning, a woman named Mrs. Adelaide Price entered the shop. She was a widow, 63 years old, kind and soft-spoken.
She admired the mahogany clock and asked the price. As Edwin wrapped the clock for her, a number appeared in his mind. Not as a thought, but as a certainty, as clear and undeniable as the ground beneath his feet. 241 days later, Mrs. Adelaide Price died quietly in her sleep. Edwin tried to stop. After Mrs. Price's death, he swore he would never use the black gear again. But the ticking returned, louder, more insistent, almost angry. So he built another clock, and another, and another. One day, a young farmer named Thomas Hale came to buy a clock for his new wife. When Edwin saw the number, 14, he could not stay silent.
"Do not ride your horse this week," Edwin whispered as Thomas left. Thomas laughed, but something in Edwin's voice made him uneasy, and he walked everywhere for the next 2 weeks instead of riding. On the 15th day, Thomas's horse threw its saddle and bolted into a ravine. If Thomas had been riding, he would have died. Word spread quickly. People began to say that the clockmaker of Ashenmore could see the future. Some came out of curiosity, some came out of fear, and some came because they desperately needed to know how much time they had left. Edwin's shop was never empty again. But knowing the future is not a gift. It is a weight, and it grows heavier with every truth you carry. Edwin began to change. He stopped sleeping. He stopped eating regular meals. His eyes became hollow, his hands unsteady. Because not every number was large. Not every customer had years ahead of them. A mother of 4 came in one afternoon, laughing, full of life. Her number was 31. A boy of 16, excited about his first job, came to buy a clock for his employer. His number was 7. Edwin wanted to warn them, but what could he say? How do you tell a mother she will not see her children grow up? How do you tell a boy that next week will be his last? In the spring of 1894, a doctor named Arthur Sinclair visited Edwin's shop. Dr. Sinclair was a man of science. He did not believe in prophecy or magic.
He had come to Ashenmore specifically to expose Edwin as a fraud. "Show me," he said, placing a gold coin on the counter. "Tell me my number." Edwin built him a small brass desk clock with a silver face. When Dr. Sinclair picked it up, the number came 12. 12 days, Edwin whispered. The doctor laughed, a loud, full laugh that echoed through the shop. 12 days? I am 42 years old, in perfect health, and you tell me I have 12 days? He left the shop, still laughing. 11 days later, Dr. Arthur Sinclair was found dead in his study. A blood vessel in his brain had burst without warning. He had been writing a letter. The pen was still in his hand. The letter was addressed to Edwin Hargrove. It read, "Dear Mr. Hargrove, I owe you an apology. I believe I was wrong about you. I have felt strange these past few days, a pressure behind my eye.
A heaviness I cannot explain. If something happens to me, I want you to know, I believe you now." He never finished the letter. After the doctor's death, Edwin made a decision that he had been avoiding for 5 years. He would build a clock for himself. On a cold December night in 1894, Edwin sat at his workbench and built the finest clock he had ever made. It was small, barely larger than his palm, with a case carved from dark walnut and hands made of polished bone. He placed the black gear inside, wound the clock, and held it in his hands. He waited. Nothing. No number came. No certainty. No vision. Just silence. He tried again the next day, and the next, and the next, but the answer was always the same. Nothing. Edwin could see Evrion's ending except his own. The black gear had one rule. You could know Evrion's time but your own. In the winter of 1896, the stranger returned. "I am tired," Edwin said. "I am tired of knowing. I wanted to stop." The stranger sat down across from him. "Then stop." "I cannot. The ticking will not let me." The stranger nodded slowly. "That is because the gear is not a tool. It is a door. Once you open a door, you cannot pretend the room behind it does not exist. Then tell me how to close it." The stranger was silent for a long time. Finally, he spoke. "Build one final clock, but this time, do not put the gear inside. Build it with your own hands, your own skill, your own heart, without the gear, without the knowledge, without the shortcut, and then destroy the gear." Edwin began building the next morning. He chose oak, strong, honest, ordinary oak. No black gear, no borrowed power, just a man and his craft. It took him 3 months. During those 3 months, the ticking grew unbearable. It shook the walls. It rattled the windows. It filled his skull until he thought he would go mad. But Edwin did not stop. And when the clock was finished, a tall, elegant grandfather clock with a deep, warm chime, Edwin held the black gear in his hand one last time. He placed it in the fire and watched it burn. It burned like wood, slowly, quietly, with a pale silver flame that cast no shadows. And as it burned, the ticking stopped. For the first time in 7 years, Edwin Hargrove heard silence. Real silence, complete silence, the kind of silence that feels like forgiveness. The next morning, a young school teacher named Clara came to buy a clock for her classroom. She touched the grandfather clock and smiled. And for the first time in years, no number came, no vision, no certainty. Edwin felt something he had almost forgotten. Relief? He did not know if Clara would live to be 30 or 90. He did not know anything about her future, and that unknowing was the most beautiful gift he had ever received. Because that is what it means to be human. We are not meant to know the ending. The mystery of tomorrow is not a curse. It is the very thing that makes today worth living. Edwin Hargrove lived for 23 more years after that night. He never saw the stranger again. He never heard the ticking again. He died on a Tuesday morning in 1919, peacefully, in the chair beside his workbench. A half-finished clock sat before him. The villagers buried him beneath an oak tree in the churchyard. His gravestone bore no dates. At his own request, it read only, He learned that not knowing is the greatest mercy of all. We chase the future, we fear the ending, we beg for certainty. But certainty is not freedom, it is a cage. The most precious thing about life is not knowing how long it will last, because it is the mystery that makes us love harder, forgive faster, and hold on tighter to the moments that matter. Time is not our enemy. Knowing too much, that is the enemy. Some stories are buried by time, others refuse to disappear. This has been Tales Beyond Time.